Crankbaits may not get the love they used to, with live scope and new lures stealing attention, but write them off at your own peril. These baits still trigger ones that other lures just won't. That's why crankbaits hold a spot in my Simple 7. Today I'm breaking down the few crankbaits you really need and how to use them to catch big ones. So this is part of my Simple 7 lure simplification series. And this one's probably doesn't look like too much simplification, but I'll tell you what, I used to carry boxes and boxes of crankbaits, and actually what I have now, I was looking at this, I can actually prune this probably to even less going forward. But a lot of guys have taken crankbaits almost entirely out. Live scoping's kind of gotten rid of how we used to use them to find fish. A lot of guys aren't using them for that. And then square bills used to be so big. All the bladed jigs, chatterbaits and stuff have kind of replaced those. And then even like the deep diving crankbait and stuff, that used to be a big tournament winning pattern. That's kind of gone away. So guys have kind of gotten away from crankbaits, but they still catch fish. And there's some times that they trigger bites that just other baits, you cannot get them to bite. And it's just the way that they'll kick out randomly, they'll hunt, and then sometimes they just deflect off the cover and go crazy. You can't get another bait that does that. They'll get fish to bite, and especially big ones. One more thing about crankbaits, they have treble hooks on them. And sometimes that's a determining factor. Man, there are a lot of times that the bladed jigs, a spinnerbait, all those other baits, they nip at them and they don't get them. You totally miss them. They have to engulf your bait to get them. Crankbaits with those treble hooks, especially when the water's cold, you can barely get them hooked on just one hook and land those fish. Ones that just slap at a bait, barely go at it. I don't know how many of the biggest fish that I catch on a day's trip, especially in cold water, be ones that just slap at it. I'll feel that thump at other baits. You go to a crankbait and you catch them. So that's the why I use crankbaits, why they're still in my Simple 7. I only use several though. Let me break it down specifically where I use them, when I use them, what I use, and how. Let's get into the details. All right, so let's get into the where I use all these guys, get them out of the way. Where is kind of two things. One is some sort of a structure, so it's a hump, a point, something like that. They're really good for that. And then also cover. That, to me, those are the two best. So if you haven't pinpoint a high spot, a point, the edge of a creek channel or something like that, these are really good for deeper water, getting down quickly to that bottom. And then depending on the crankbait, if it's a 5-foot deep hump, you can get a crankbait that just digs into the top, works it perfectly down to like 15, 20 feet. You can match that crankbait that runs at that depth, and it works it really well. The other thing is with these baits, they're so good. Crankbaits are great at fishing cover. And when they come through cover, they all have these bills, and they don't hit it and just keep on going. Like a bladed jig or something, a spinnerbait wants a lot of times to snag up. The crankbait, it doesn't just kind of swim through without snagging, like say like a jig or something does. They come into the cover, they deflect, and they'll careen, they'll go a weird direction, never the same way twice. Usually won't snag up, but when you bump into that cover and they flare out, that just creates a reaction strike. I want to hit rock, craggy rock or chunk rock, boulder, something like that. And then wood cover, they're great at that. It hits laydowns and stuff. If you know it's there and you take your time, it's going to come through really well, and it's going to careen off that and kick out. The one spot where it's harder to fish, but it's so good, is grass. Now, if you get a deep dive or a big one like this and it's 2-foot deep grass, it's going to bog up. But if you take your time, you can literally fish any crankbait through any grass. You're just really going to have to fish it slowly. But let's say there's grass that's about 6 feet down, and this is like a dime 6. It drives about 6 feet. So at the maximum, it's going to hit that grass. And I can pick a crankbait, and I can change the size of line on it so it runs shallower or deeper, and I can make it just tick that grass and hit it every once in a while. And if I feather and I rip it out of there, or I make it hit that grass and go out, most people won't do that. And either they're missing the grass totally, they're coming across it, or they go straight down in it and bog it up just time after time. In grass, hydrilla, milfoil, eelgrass, you name it, they don't see many crankbaits. So that's the perfect time to throw crankbaits there because they don't see many of them. Now, the other thing, the good crankbaits, they want to wander or hunt. And that means instead of just when you retrieve them in a straight line and you have this thing tuned, it should come straight at you and just a standard crankbait's going to never veer off that. Now the good ones that hunt or kick out, all of a sudden they're coming and they're nice and true and wobbling. All of a sudden, whoop, it'll just come out one way, and it may do that twice in a row. It may all of a sudden kick out this way and go straight, and then go to the other side a little bit, another side again. But every once in a while, it's going to kick out. It's going to flare out. And that you don't have to do anything with. You can just slow retrieve it, and this thing's going to give erratic action every once in a while. And those are the key crankbaits. So the ones I want, I either have to force them into cover, make them crane off it, or I'm going to have it hunt periodically, because normally if it's just a straight, steady retrieve, sometimes that'll work, but that's pretty generic, pretty vanilla, and that's where the bladed jigs and all the other stuff have taken off, because you can make them kick out, stop and go, come through cover, and do crazy stuff a little better, where these you have to either know what you're doing to bring it through the cover and force it off there, or you're going to have to get a true running bait that's going to kick out. So there's lots of stuff to cover through here, and we'll get into colors and the gear I use and some common mistakes people have. We'll get into all that, but let's keep plowing through and talk about the what. What baits do I actually use? And it's pretty simple. I used to carry a lot of them, and let me run you through the basic ones that I throw now, and a couple of the ones I used to throw a lot more and I don't much now. And start off with my go-to is this Fritz 5. It's a flat-sided crankbait. It's a finesse one. Flat side, you see, instead of round. It's a tight wiggle instead of a wide wobble. It's tight. I can go with the silent or just a single clack and rattle in there so I can get a little bit of sound. But this is finessey, and it seems like this one it'll come through cover pretty well. I can make a kick off of stuff. It runs at that perfect kind of depth that I fish most of the time. And anywhere from like 2.5, 3 feet of water down to 5, 6. If this thing is hitting the bottom, it gets great action. When it's not, it's got a little hunt and move to it where they'll still bite it. Most of the time where I'm fishing, this is my go-to. It's that Fritz 5. And this is a super popular one on the tournament trail. It's one of those I don't have to think about it too much. The nice thing, all these baits, what I've done, and I used to throw a lot of balsa ones and all sorts of different ones. They were hard to throw. And I've gone to baits that I always throw on a bait caster. You know, it's always windy when they're biting these best. It's windy days, and I can't always go with the wind at my back. So I want something that on a bait caster casts really reliably. They're easy to cast. This Frittside is basically, they use this flash disc. It's like the old balsa baits, but it's heavier, and it has a casting system where this thing will whip out. In the wind, I can still throw it. So that's a big key. So I can cover water with that. And then the dime series, so these are the round. So that's the traditional, more of like it's a wider wobble, and it rolls. It pushes water. When the water's warmer, I like these better. These will naturally hunt. I can get these deeper, and I can adjust these. I get the same action, but I can adjust how deep they run. There's a dime 4, dime 6, dime 10. I use those 3 quite a bit. That 4 and 6 are pretty small. This is a 6 right here. It's a little guy, and the 4 is even smaller. I can throw that, like, even when they're pressured and stuff. It's natural in the warmer water. I like that better. It has you hear that single rattle in there. It's a weight transfer system. I can cast this thing farther even than the Frittside. I can whip this thing out. So if the wind's blowing, the tiny 4 and 6 size, I can launch them a mile instead of those stinking little balsa baits that you can't cast. It's got that single thump and rattle. So that's like that. I like the one knocker, the calling sound on that. They make a bigger size, you know, the 10 that I will throw some, but I find myself, you know, that's more the summer, the 10, the 15, the traditional offshore fishing. But most of the time, that 4 and 6, that little one, I don't know, it's just a small minnow that's in those shallow areas where everybody else is throwing chatterbaits, blade jigs, you know, flipping now. Not many people are throwing crankbaits anymore. So if I come through with that crankbait, I can catch them. Now, I do have a specialized one for rocks, because a lot of times you want to fish through fast, and you want it to really deflect off wildly and shallow stumps and stuff. This is a brand new one that's kind of replaced, I'll get into it, a big category I used to throw. But this is the shallow money badger. It has a circuit board lip, and it deflects off rock well. I can fish it really fast. And this one, the fact that I can just plow it through that rock, and so much of the time that's where you're fishing shallow, you know, it's rip-rap around a boat ramp or a marina or a bridge, and then it's like those little rocky banks and stuff, transition banks where it's pre-spawn, where it's in the fall. That's where this money badger in 3 different sizes. I can get really small up to a pretty good sized one. I throw these a lot now. I used to, you know, what it's replaced is square bill crankbaits, and these were so big, and the old like the Lucky Crafts, the RCs, and the, you know, there used to be so many of these that were so good. We all used them for the longest time, and so many guys have thrown them. And that big wide wobble at first, staying really shallow, is great, and it still works at times. But it seems like that's played out. And if I'm using that one, I can control my depth more up in those shallow areas and feather through the grass, or keep it just above the bottom with a bladed jig or a swim jig. So much better than these crankbaits when I get really shallow like that. So the square bills have kind of played out, and that's where I've gone to that Frittside. When I'm in shallow, I'll go to this one. It's more subtle. It's a different look when most people are throwing that round, the wide wobbling one. And then the other thing that I used to throw a ton of were lipless crankbaits. These used to be, again, in the grass. You know, these were so good. And you can throw them a mile. You can stop and go cast these. You can plow them down, get them down to the grass. When you rip them free, they still will trigger fish, and they're loud. Some have single knockers. Some have a lot. They call fish and let them know they're there. Man, I've caught in pre-spawn, in the spawn, and then in the fall, you know, when they're chasing bait fish, I've caught tons of fish on those. Anymore, again, bladed jigs, I can control the depth easier with those. It's less of a chore to work them out. They don't hang in the grass as much. So pre-spawn, I typically use, again, that Frittside or a bladed jig more. The one time I do like these is in the fall, when you know, this is that jack, that little 6 or 7 size here, the smallest size one. It looks like a bait fish, and it's just that 1-inch threadfin shad that they get on so good in the fall. That's where the lipless, I can throw it so far, I can burn these, and it seems like a fast retrieve with the stop and go. I can just cover so much water that you can't do that quite that fast with a bladed jig or anything else in that super shallow. That's the time where I throw the lipless the most now, so it's in the fall. But outside of that, these lipless, unless I'm, you know, really trying to fish behind myself and throw a bladed jig for a couple days and try to give them a different look, that's kind of gone out. So basically, it's that Frittside is what I use the most. That shallow money badger now, if I'm going to plow over rock, I love to fish that fast. Sometimes I can trigger strikes, and if I'm going deeper, I go with that really good casting, that dime, and that's kind of it. Those are the baits that I really use, and I figure if I can't get in with those, then I probably need to try something else. Now we can touch on color quick. To me, the biggest, it's pretty basic on this, and the setup, you know, I'll run you through that. The biggest thing to me is the retrieve. I think that makes a huge difference, how you retrieve them. That's where I see the mistakes. That's how you get the bites. So that's important. Hold on for a second for that. I'm sure y'all want, everybody always wants to know color. So this ghost, like ghost minnow and stuff, this has been probably my favorite. Even in muddy water, I can't believe how just this translucent, it's kind of shaddy. So much of the bait fish up there, if it's fairly bright, if the water's fairly clear, like I said, this has just been so good. It's like they've seen so many of these. It's a different look, especially if you get a little stain or mud. Like nobody's throwing these, and I'll be surprised how good they work. But traditional shad type colors, you can't go wrong with that. I throw that a lot. So basically, like the clear or shad, I throw that most of the time. If it gets bright, you know, a lot of mud or something like that, then the fire tigers and the chartreuse and that type of stuff, those will be good too. A lot of guys like that, but they see so many of those. And then the crawfish type patterns, you know, the red in the cold weather months, something about red, I don't know what it is, but they eat red big time. So the translucent red, the solid reds, and that muddy water especially, you know, start to get more with the orange and the dark red. Those can be really good. In the clear water with that green background, that red stands up well against it. So this is more of a ghost red craw. That's a killer for me. The solid-sided orange and red, that's more on a bright sunny day when it's muddy. I like that, whereas this stands out against the green water, but it's still translucent enough. And then some of the crawdad patterns in like Ozark Lakes, the stuff where it's really clear and I know they're eating crawdads. Every time you catch one, it spits up, and they always have a little orange accent on the pinchers, that brown and stuff. Natural crawfish type things, the phantom green craw, that greenish, brownish with touches of orange and stuff. hard to beat those crawfish patterns. And one color I forgot to mention, the chromes and silvers in the fall when they're really on that bait fish, or when it's a shad spawn, that bright silver, just that flash. If it's bright sunny out there, a lot of times that flash will seal the deal. For gear now, I've settled on just one setup. It allows me to fish all these that I'm using. I can throw it on a bait caster, throw it a mile, cover a lot of water with it, and I've used this setup for a long time now. And then the way like I said, the retrieve, we'll get into that. That to me, that's way more important. You can see this one's faded. I get, this is actually a prototype one. I've gotten to test a few of the prototypes over the years, but this is a 7'6" Abu Garcia. This is the Veritas winch, but they have anything in the Abu Garcia, the winch rods are the slower, the mod fast. That means they bend really deep in the rod. So any of the winch series rods, and I like the 7'6", the medium heavy, moderate fast, and any of the rods you can get it in has been so good for me over the years. This thing bends so deep, I can keep fish hooked up really well, and it also bends deep enough I can launch any of these baits. That Frittside and stuff, you can use a 7 foot, like a medium heavy, good tip rod, and you can roll cast and stuff. If you're fishing around more docks and stuff, I'm not really doing that. I'm typically throwing these down over points, over creek channel bends, over big grass flats, covering transition banks, 45-degree banks and stuff, covering a lot of water. To me, the 7'6", I can cast it farther, and also when you're playing those fish and they're barely hooked with one treble hook in there, that's where the long rod with the soft tip is really going to help you on these. You give up a little bit in casting accuracy, but you can do well enough, and I just think you're playing better. So 7'6" with that soft tip, to me, that's the way to go. You go err on the side of a lighter rod. I think you'll be happy. You don't have to worry about horsing these things in. I've caught tons of big Lake Fork fish and Sam Rayburn fish on this rod. So the reel itself, that's the one thing I will change up. And if I'm cranking a lot, I'll carry 2 and 3 of these. If I'm really, like say in a tournament or something, I'm really specializing in it. But I go with the faster gear ratio. Typically, I'll go with the STX, which is the Abu Garcia Revo. It's 8-to-1. I like the faster gear ratio just because at the end of a dead cast, or if I'm really want to cover water fast, I can turn my trolling motor up fast and go towards it, and that's throwing a lot of slack in my line, so I can cover a lot of water that way. If I want to slow down, I have no problem going super slow. But if I want to speed up and turn up the trolling motor, I can just cover a lot more water. So that high gear ratio helps. If I'm always throwing that Frittside 5s a little bit lighter, if I'm throwing the 4 all the time, the dime 4, this is the 6, but if it's the 4, that little one, I'll go to the smaller reel, that Xenon X, which just has a lower startup. It's a smaller reel, and it doesn't have quite as much drag power, but you don't need that with a crankbait. It actually has a more finesse one, so I will switch to that sometimes just because those lighter baits, I can throw it even farther. If I'm throwing like the dime 6 and bigger, or I've got the wind at my back, not worried about it, then I just go with the regular sized Revo XTS, but make sure I get the 8-to-1. The line, a lot of times, I'm not very big into light line on them in a lot of situations. If I'm fishing around a lot of rock, if I'm throwing, trying to keep it over the top of grass, a lot of times I go 12 or 15 pound fluorocarbon. They don't seem to be that line shy. It keeps the bait. I can make it run shallower, and I'm worried about not fighting the fish through it, but my bait's always going over that rocky and nasty stuff, and I'm getting my line abraded. So in that case, I'll go with the bigger line. Now, sometimes I'm trying to get it deeper, and I want better bait action, and in those cases, in more open water, then I will, and I want to boom cast out there. I'll do this a lot with like the 6, the dime 6. I'll go ahead and use the 8-pound test on that 8-pound fluorocarbon, and I can throw that a mile. That I use the Berkley 100% fluorocarbon. The diameter runs a little big, so it's probably like a regular size 10 for a lot of other lines. But that thing, it lets the bait get down there deeper, and if you use the soft drag and just fighting with that soft rod tip, I do not break fish off on that. I don't have a problem with it. These baits, the other thing, I want ones that have pretty good action, even with a bigger line. You know, if you go with something like a shad wrap, those little baits like that, some of those finessey little balsa ones, you need light line for them to work right. My Simple 7, I go with stuff that has big line, and I can go ahead and still get it to work. And then the other thing you might see here is I go with a clip. a snap. And it's not the snap swivel. I know a lot, that's like not the noob, not the swivel on the front. These snaps, a lot of baits actually come with the snap. You know, like the wiggle wart stuff, they always come with the snap. And it's like a loop knot. It allows some freedom there. I don't know if the action's any better, but the main thing is a lot of times in these baits, I really want to vary up color and rattles or no rattles, and also try a little deeper ones, a little bit shallower running ones. I want to play through it pretty quickly. I don't want to carry 3 different cranking rods. I just want to be able to switch out pretty quick. I go from one cove where it's a little muddier, next one has some grass in it, the next one's deeper or whatever. That way I can just snap off that clip. Instead of having to retie, I can just put it on really quickly. I can try half the cove with a white one, go to the chrome one, go to the red one. That snap to me is, I mean, that's just like a guide secret there. I can change their baits so much quicker. And if you have to retie them, it's funny, it only takes a few more seconds to tie it, but you won't do it. But if you can just snap out that clip, then you'll get yourself to do it. So a lot of times I'll do that so I can quickly change out colors, different bait styles, different sounds. Now this is a big one. This is what really determines if you're going to catch fish or not with them. And all these baits, you know, you can fish them way better or way worse, and it's how you retrieve them. A few things you can do with crankbaits. It's just a pendulum. So basically the higher you hold your rod tip, the higher up in the air, the shallower you make it run, and the deeper, if you point that thing straight down, the deeper you're going to make your bait run. Might not seem like, well, you know, what's the big difference? If, like, again, if the bottom is 3-4 foot deep and you're always, every time you get buried up in it, you're getting a bunch of gunk on your bait, or there's grass that's 5 feet below the surface and you're trying to keep it over the top of it instead of plowing down, holding your rod flat versus straight up versus straight down, that might be like a 3 foot swing, maybe 4 or 5 foot even, depending on a deeper diving crankbait, how deep that thing goes. It makes a huge difference with a 7 foot rod. If I hold it straight up, that's 10 feet up in the air. I hold it straight down. I mean, that's like you're talking a 12, 14 foot swing right there, how deep that thing's going. So it's a big difference in how deep your bait runs. But that's kind of like a macro level one. But then during the retrieve, what gets these fish, you remember I said what triggers them is that sudden change of direction or when it kicks out. Well, that's left and right, and when it hits something, it can crane out. But you can also make it change the way if it's digging down deeper or if it's coming up. So you can change the up and down plane. So you can simply give it a pause and pull up and make that thing go from dig, dig, dig to all of a sudden, whoop, like pull it up like that. That changes the direction it goes. And when it's kicking out every once in a while and then all of a sudden it comes up, a lot of times that'll get them to strike. So being able to pull up or keep it down for a long time then pull up, that changes the direction it goes as well. Now, a few other things you can do. One, you can take your rod and just like it's a regular jerk bait, these things, when you pause it, you can give a little pop, or you can reel and pause and then one pop, and that thing's going to dart a little bit to the side. You can't make it walk side to side quite as good as a jerk bait, but you can make it kick out. So that's one little thing on a pause. Sometimes I give it a pop or 2 pops, real short ones, and try to make that bait pause and then it turn sideways there, that little pop. The other thing is sometimes if you grind it through the bottom, that's why I keep on talking about this shallow money badger and how I like to burn it and run it through the shallows. Well, the thing is, sometimes just plowing and kicking up a little silt trails and stuff, and this thing just disturbing all the bottom and everything else scurrying out of the way because this thing's just plowing and coming real fast through there. Sometimes grinding on the bottom is the deal. Then other times, like slow reeling it and just like kind of just feathering it or slow coming through cover or just creeping up and over the rocks, that's better. So you have to try a little bit of those. I'll go back and forth. And the neat thing is, with these, you can almost worm fish them. When you get up to a piece of cover or something, instead of keep on reeling, you can slow it down. And instead of actually keep reeling, what you do is take your rod tip and just like you're worm fishing into the side, just kind of like pull it, and almost like you're pulling a worm or a Carolina rig or a jig through a brush pile or something, kind of ease it through there. When you feel the obstruction, you can stop, let it float up, slow ease it through there. You can really kind of worm your way through cover. It won't snag up that much, and it's a great way. All of a sudden, it's just kind of, it's going fast, and then you worm it through there. And as soon as you feel it clear, then you can reel it fast again and kind of sprint out of there and turn them on. But the biggest way I like to do, a lot of times there's no cover. You're just kind of going along. You're hitting the bottom sometimes you're not. But I like to do a steady retrieve, and for whatever reason, I'll do that pull in once or twice a cast a lot of times. I'll pull straight up and make that thing, it's going along, and then make it come up. Once or twice a retriever, I do that. But every 5 to 8 cranks, I would say, I'm reeling, and then I just pull to the side. So if I'm out here, I start my retrieve, and I just pull to the side a little bit for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, something like that. Then I reel again and give it a little pull, maybe give 1 pull up like that and pull. And I don't care if it's a lipless or any of these crankbaits. For whatever reason, I think that it vibrates when it's being retrieved faster, and then it just kind of slides forward and doesn't really wobble even, just kind of goes straight forward. Then it starts to wobble again. If it's the lipless, that bait's going to go down to the go down towards the bottom and then take off again when you pull it. I don't know what it is, but that just pull, and that's not pulling up, pulling down. I just pull to the side, start reeling again, pull this, and I do that stop and go the whole way back to the boat. That is the number 1 retrieve for me. That's the number 1 trigger, mixed in with when I pull up or at the very end of the cast when that bait starts to take off. Those are the times when it hits. Those little pauses right there, when I pull up, or when the bait stops, it's at its maximum depth, and you're right at the end of retrieve and it starts to come up. Those 3 times are when they eat it. So keep on doing stop and goes, pull up, changing the cadence. That totally makes them bite. If you just chunk it out and retrieve it back, I don't know, maybe it's different for you, but for me, I get like 5% of the bites that I do when I'm doing the stop and go. And that leads me to my tips on it, or the common mistakes, right? So there's 2 big ones here. The first being coming through cover that you just reel too hard. You're going to have to, like I said, finesse it through it. When you start to feel something, it's going to pull a little harder. After you crank a little bit, you're going to feel how it feels different when you're going into grass or when you're coming into a laydown. You need to slow down. The slower you crank, the more feel you're going to have. If you're just power cranking, mindlessly going fast, it's going to be too late. You're not going to feel it till it gets in there. So learning how to do it, going slower, but once you feel that extra tug or that drag, slowing down and then easing it through there. If you're hanging up, people get frustrated, they get more turned up, they just go faster, they get fed up with it, they snag, break it off, or to stop using it. Calm down. You're getting snagged, you're in the right spots. They're designed to go through there. Take your time, mellow out, and just slow retrieve it through there. Know that you're going to hang up some. And micro tip, keep a plug knocker in the boat. I always keep one, have it handy. You drop it down there, hits that thing. Usually it comes right out, or you can just pull it out. You get your bait back almost all the time. It's going to hang up some. That's where you have to put it. But just ease up through there. Slow retrieve it. Stop and go. Pull with your rod through the cover. Instead of reel it through the cover, just slow pull it through there. Kind of ease it through there just like you would pretend it's a worm or a jig. And that thing will come through. And when you ease it through there, it's going to be worth the time, because coming through that cover, that's where they live. And coming through there, and when it clears, that's when they smash it. So it's worth the time doing that. And the last tip, this is the most important one. Anytime you feel it stop vibrating, you have to snap it. And that's how you set the hook on this, and that's how you clear the gunk and the vegetation off it. So many times it grabs a leaf, it fouls up a little bit, gets a tiny little limb, something like that on it. And if you give it a snap real quick like that, it's going to clear it. And when it bursts free of that, a lot of times that actually triggers a bite. But back up a second, a lot of times that little twig or that little bit of weight on there, that's a fish actually just nipping at it. Remember how we said they barely get in the corner of their mouth or something? They'll just nip at it. And if you don't instantly, the second that vibration goes away, give it a quick snap. And we're not talking, oh, I got a fish, reel down and set the hook. That fish already let go. The second you feel it, this is a reflex test. It literally is. The quicker you can do it, it doesn't need to be big. It's an exposed hook. If you snap it, it's going to set. You're going to get enough. Then you can lay into them if you want. But the big thing, the second it stops vibrating, you feel anything feels a little weird, quick snap. So reel in, feel, oh, and just a snap like that. It's a 7-foot rod. If you snap your wrist that much, that tip is probably moving like 5 feet. It's going to be enough to start that hook. It's set in a little bit. You'll feel the pull, and then you can fight them. Sometimes that's going to get you in a snag. That's just how it goes. Usually that's a piece of grass, a leaf, a little limb, something like that, and it clears it. And like I said, a lot of times that's grass or that debris. That's what triggers a strike. So it's a good thing to do. Cost you a couple snags, but if you don't, you're going to miss so many, especially when the water's cold. These fish are just nipping at it, just slapping at it. you're going to miss the majority of your bites. So finesse it through that cover. When the vibration goes away, snap it, and you'll be surprised how many times, by God, there was a fish there. Simplify my tackle, throwing baits that I know work instead of changing up and trying things I'm not sure about. That's the way I fish these days. Check out my full Simple 7 playlist. Shows you how to catch more fish instead of all the time down the bottom of the boat changing baits.